Hello, fourth graders. Welcome to language. Today we're going to be talking about direct quotations and quotation marks, how to properly utilize quotation marks. So look at the picture on page 25. We're on pages 25 and 26 today. Look at the pictures on page 25. There's a picture of two girls having a conversation, right? They're talking to each other. Well, how do we know what the girls are saying? Well, in this little illustration, there are the little bubbles. You know, when you draw pictures and you're illustrating your work, sometimes you can draw those nice little bubbles and we know what this girl said and we know what that girl said, right? So that's kind of a fun way to show what someone's saying. But when you're writing a report or you're writing a summary or something like that, we can't always draw pictures, right? We have to find another way to demonstrate or to show that someone is saying something, right? The exact words of another person. So in order for us to do that, we utilize what's called quotation marks. So here, I have written the first example and the second example that's written in your blue section on page 25. Okay? So it says, one Saturday, Shelley went over to Melanie's house and asked, "What would you like to do today?" So what are the words that Shelley asked Melanie? What were her words, right? What would you like to do today? This is what Shelley said to Melanie, correct? So in order for us to show that Shelley said some exact words, we put her words in these quotation marks. Okay, so notice that a quotation mark is preceded by a comma. So it says, one Saturday, Shelley went over to Melanie's house and asked, comma. Now, what did she ask? What would you like to do today? Notice that her question ends with a question mark. And the quotation marks are outside of the question mark. Notice that because what is the first word in the sentence that Shelley asked, it is also capitalized. You must remember that. Points will be taken if you do not remember to capitalize the first word in the sentence of a direct quotation. That is one of your direct quotation rules. Okay? So, comma, open quotation, capitalize first word, in punctuation, then quotation mark. Please do not put a question mark and a quotation on top. This will be marked wrong. Do not put a closed quotation and then a question mark. This will be marked wrong, okay? So it's punctuation, then in quotation, all right? Okay, let's look at the second example. It says, Melanie replied. Now, what did Melanie answer? What did she reply to Shelley's question? What she said was, it says, Melanie replied, "Let's help Mr. Bowman rake leaves." So what was it that Melanie replied? What did she say? She said, "Let's help Mr. Bowman rake leaves." So how do we know where what Melanie said begins? It is set off with an open quotation. Her first word is capitalized, right? And of course it is preceded by the comma. Melanie replied, comma. What did she reply? Open quotation. Let's help Mr. Bowman rake leaves. Period, close quotation. Notice that the period comes before the close quotation, not above it, right? It's not period and close quotation on top. This will be marked wrong. It is not close quotation, then period. This will be marked wrong. Please pay close attention to that on your quizzes and your tests, because if it is on top, I will mark it wrong, okay? They do not go together in one line. The period comes first, then the quotation, the close quotation, okay? All right, and same thing here. Reply, comma. Notice that my comma is clearly before the open quotation. They are not one on top of the other. If you do comma and quotation this way, I will mark it wrong. That is not the correct way to write the quotation, okay? All right, so keep that in mind. Okay, so let's look at the look closely yellow box at the bottom. It says, what does the first word of a direct quotation begin with? We just talked about this. The first word in this direct quotation begins with what? A capital letter. Do not forget to capitalize the first word of your direct quotation. So, in the sentences above, what comes right in the front of each direct quotation? What comes in the front of before, right? What's in the front of it? What's in the front of that direct quotation? A comma. All right. So, how many pairs? Remember that pairs are two, right? If you have a pair of shoes, do you have just one shoe? No, we have a pair of shoes because we have a left foot and a right foot, right? Same thing with direct quotations. You have a left direct quotation and a right direct quotation. You have a pair of quotations. You have an open quotation and a closed quotation. Open quotation, closed quotation. Okay? It's a pair of quotations. So the question says, how many pairs, how many sets of two of quotation marks are used with each quotation? How many pairs? Left and a right, that's one pair. Left and a right, one pair. Okay? So the answer is 1. So the last thing says to underline the words in the sentences above that are not a part of the direct quotation. So in both of these sentences, all of the words that are not in the direct quotation should be underlined. So go back and underline everything that is not in the direct quotation. So in the first sentence, one Saturday, Shelley went over to Melanie's house and asked. That is not what Shelley said. Okay? That's just the introduction to what she said. Okay? Same thing here. Melanie replied. That is not what Melanie said. It's an introduction to tell you what Melanie is about to say. But it's not in the direct quotations. Okay? So both of those should be underlined because they are not a part of the direct quotation. Moving on to page 26. Now this is where we get into the quotation marks 1 rules, right? Use quotation marks before and after direct quotations. That is a rule. We will have several rules, okay? Everything is all about rules for grammar, okay? So, a direct quotation is a person's exact words. So, if your sibling tells you, Mom said you need to get up, right? Well, they're saying it, but they use the word that. Mom said that you need to get up. That takes out a direct quotation. But if they said, Mom said, comma, open quotation, you need to get up, period, close quotation, then that is a direct quotation, okay? So we'll learn more about that and that word that. Words that can be interjected that take away the direct quotation are words that you translate into your own words that are not direct quotation. But right now we are going to focus on what people are saying and how to identify exactly what they said. Okay? So we'll add on a little bit more as we go. All right. So think A. Well, before we get to think A, the blue box gives you a couple of examples. It gives you an example of a direct quotation in the front, in the beginning of the sentence. Come to supper, called mother. Notice this one is a little bit different. When it says, come to supper, called mother. Mother is her name. That's what they call her, so it's capitalized. Notice that what she said is in direct quotations. The first word is capitalized. And here, instead of a period, there's a comma because it's followed by who said it. So this is the difference between one in the front of the quotation and then one in the back of the introduction. Okay? Come to supper, called mother versus Melanie replied. Okay, so this one ends with a punctuation mark. This one, because it's first, is followed by a comma. Okay, that's going to be big in your on your quizzes and tests. Okay, all right. So the second one says the sailor cried, comma. Now, what did the sailor cry? Open quotation, capital first letter. There's land ahead. Our voyage is almost over. Period, close quotation. Now, notice in that one, there are two sentences that the sailor said, okay? The sailors cried. They said two sentences in one breath, so to speak, okay? So be careful that you don't end it just because you see a period, okay? If there's something else they're saying that follows the period, then you include everything that they said word for word in your quotation, okay? You don't need two sets or two pairs of direct quotations. You just include it in one direct quotation, okay? All right, so note, remember, note, if a person says more than one sentence in a row, put quotation marks only before the first sentence and after the last sentence, okay? All right, so the example for that section, we have one here. It says, when will the ball game begin? Asked Howard. That is your first sentence for think A. Okay, so what you have quotation marks here before when, okay, and then you have quotation marks that are missing, okay. When will the ball game begin? Notice this is a question mark. It's not a comma because it's a question. If it's a comma or an exclamation, if it's an interrogative sentence or an exclamatory sentence, you will put the proper punctuation, then the close quotation. Only when it's a period do you put a comma if it's first, okay? Only if a period goes here will you replace it with a comma when it's saying who is speaking, okay? So when will the ball game begin? Question mark. Close quotation comes after the question mark, not on top of the question mark, not before the question mark, okay? Ask Howard, period, okay? Pay close attention to this, guys. All right. So you will do numbers 2 through 10 for Think A. I will send you all of the answers on tomorrow, okay? So for Think B, I also did the first one. So this one, the direct quotation was in the front. The second one, I'm doing the direct quotation in the back, okay? So it says, Mr. Brown said, we should plant the seeds soon. Okay, so you have to put the first and the last quotation, the pair of quotation marks, okay? The open quotation and the close quotation. So what did Mr. Brown say? Okay, he said, we should plant the seed soon. This is exactly what Mr. Brown said. So we see that it's set off by a comma. We want to make sure that our quotation mark, our open quotation, comes after the comma but before the W. Not on top of the W, not on top of the comma, okay? Mr. Brown said, comma, then open quotation, capital W-E, should plant the seed soon, period, then close quotation. Not on top of the period, okay? All right. So you will put your period and your close quotation. Do not put period and close quotation on top. I will mark it wrong. Do not put close quotation and then the period. That is wrong. It is period, then the close quotation, okay? All right. So you can go ahead and complete Think A and Think B. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Send me a text or such. And I look forward to our next lesson, guys. Have a blessed day.